Food Connect's a pretty amazing place, and getting to know both Robert and Emma Kate has been holds a very special place in my heart for what they've done and what Brisbane has the potential to produce, especially. So, thank you. My name is Jack Stone. I am a beekeeper at B13 Neighbourhood Honey, and basically we put beehives around the city and through suburban areas, utilising unused or misused space to activate those spaces and engage local communities within an urban environment. So essentially I am putting beehives on rooftops, in backyards, into community gardens, and teaching people how to keep their own bees. All while I am selling and sharing my honey with the local businesses that are supporting me as a beekeeper in the city and who are hosting those hives. And through those mediums and through those businesses, organisations, restaurants, cafes, we're able to communicate a much larger message around understanding where our food comes from and how it's produced, all through utilising the bee as a messenger with that. So, just as stated in the movie, with the 1/3 of our global food supply is pollinated or comes from the hard work of the honeybee. I see it as all pollinators contribute to a huge amount of the food that we eat. And here in Australia, it's a much larger figure. It's upwards of 65% of our agricultural crops, both food for humans and also food for cattle and food for stock, is pollinated by the honeybee for it to, on a commercial and wild scale level, for it to be brought to seed or for it to produce a fruit, an edible fruit, vegetable, or nut. So B13, being the communicator of the 1/3 of our global food supply, is the company that I run. I wouldn't yet say it's a social enterprise. I'd say it's more of an environmentally focused enterprise. We would like to pair in the future with a lot more of a broader social impact. I guess we'd like to be able to reach a much broader social environment, not only the environmentalists, but also the people who are here in the city, on this earth, to talk more about the one thing that brings us together, which is, as Robert's very dearly connected with, is food, and what helps our food grow, and also what helps us grow, and that's clean food and food that is brought to life through proper management and holistic management. So I run commercial bees, just like the ones you saw here in the movie. There are a couple of beekeepers in here tonight. A very close friend of mine, Paul Wood, who runs natural beekeeping beehives. So they're very, very different in the way that they're structured, but in the overall, in the overall scheme of things, they're both there to nurture and help bee colonies procreate and grow and live healthy, abundant lifestyles. The commercial way of keeping bees was for me the best way that I could, well, probably in the beginning the easiest way that I could get into bees, not having read deeply into the natural beekeeping methods, but more and more I'm starting to incorporate little bits here and there that kind of pull from natural beekeeping methods and incorporate them piece by piece into the Langstroth or the commercial beekeeping environment. So maybe we can talk about that. You guys can ask some questions. I know I won't go into too much detail, but essentially helping the bee is what I've been trying to do for the past 2 years. I got hooked on the bee from a very early stage in 2012 after I'd just returned from a couple of years overseas working on organic and biodynamic farms in California and through Germany. And I never really had an association with the bee until I came back home to read a whole bunch of articles and theories and ideas on the web about what was happening to the bee. And I thought, all these farms back in all these places that I loved and learned so much on, they wouldn't be around without the bee. And how could that have gone so unnoticed? So as I looked further and further into it, it was a pretty big issue. The further and further you read into what's happening with the bees on a global scale, the scarier it becomes for us as an island here in Australia. So it's another part of what I'm trying to communicate to the city dwellers, the people in the city who don't have a huge connection with the country because of the lives that we live. Trying to speak on behalf of the people in the country who are finding it hard and who don't quite have the words to articulate their emotions behind what's happening out there. So that's kind of a side project, and the main project for B1/3 is to educate us all about the importance of the bee within the urban and rural environments. So,
Jack, can you just tell us, have there been any instances of colony collapse disorder in Australia that you know of?
Not that I specifically know of. I know I've had my own cases of pesticide. I guess pesticide infiltration in the hive. Within 7 days of me placing a hive over in Hendra on a friend's garage rooftop, thousands of bees were coming back dead. And this was literally blocks, maybe 5 or 6 blocks from the race course over there that backs onto the Southern Cross motorway. Or the Southern Cross Highway freeway. So that was, I collected a whole bunch of bees from there and sent them away to the DPI's testing facility and came back with a list of about 25 to 35 different pesticides, and they all had ratings next to them. So whatever they were spraying on that race course, I would say was the main contributor to that hive die-off. But on a larger scale, I'm not entirely sure. I know lots of beekeepers do lose their hives to over-pesticide use, but often when pesticides are being used on crops, beekeepers are warned and they take their hives off. So the pesticides can be sprayed and they bring them back. No doubt it still has a pretty large effect on the colonies though.
Thank you.
I'm Emma from Cultivate Collective. I've only been doing this for 6 months, so Jack's further down the road and Robert's further down the road again from me. So by no means an expert, but I started out, my background's in design and floristry, and my husband Dave's just starting out in his horticultural career, so we wanted to do something together that we could be kind of proud of and feel ethically responsible in what we were doing. Working in the floral industry, I often found it quite difficult to work out what the source of the flowers was that I was purchasing, and also what the processes were behind that. But I knew from research that commercial flower production obviously involved a lot of chemicals and pesticides a lot of the time, and genetic modification, which is obvious when you kind of look at the flowers, and a lot of commercially grown flowers lack a lot of those natural idiosyncrasies that I think make flowers beautiful, like leaf shapes and funny stems and things like that. And they're also missing certain things like their scent. And so I guess it was obvious that these flowers weren't entirely natural. Their vase life was like off the charts. So it's sort of, I could tell they weren't 100% organic or real. And I also knew that a lot of the flowers that were coming into Australia were coming from as far as Europe and Africa and South America. And at the same time, a lot of our best flower crops are going overseas to places like Japan, which seems crazy. Like even looking at the documentary, looking at American oranges coming from Peru, and we get American oranges here, and it's all just going round and round, and same thing's happening with flowers. So Dave was studying at Grovely TAFE, and we live in Capera, and we knew it was hard to grow flowers commercially with less pesticides and water and transportation, packaging, etc. But then wandering around the suburbs, and this is what people had told us as well, but wandering around the suburbs and seeing the backyards, some of the beautiful backyards that people had, particularly older people in the suburbs, and a lot of Dave's teachers at TAFE who were older people had these amazing flower gardens with these really high quality cut flowers in them. And we thought, well, there's a lot to be learned from older people who, I guess their main benefit is they've been in the one place for a long time, they've been able to observe what works in their garden and what the soil composition is, and to improve that over time. So we just thought, maybe there's a way that we can create a mutually beneficial business model, because some of these people are getting older and they can't do the physical side of the gardening so much. maybe there's a way we can help out with that in exchange for some of their really valuable knowledge about little tips and tricks about how to flower farm, essentially, in a suburban setting. And over time, maybe create a network of suburban flower farmers. So florists can source flowers and know where they come from. It's a very transparent process, and then in the process, consumers and clients can know where their flowers are coming from too. It made sense to us, the kind of people that buy a bunch of flowers to someone, they might not do that if they knew the negative impacts that the purchase was having. So, yeah.
Thank you. That's fantastic. Can I just ask Emma or Jack, do you have any suggestions if we want to help the bees? Are there any particular things we can plant in our garden that would be good food for them? Do you start?
So obviously flowering plants is obvious. The Brisbane City Council actually has a good link on their website which has native plants by group, I think, and they have birds and butterflies, and they have frogs and lizards and things like that. So the birds and butterflies link also has a lot of bee tips for bees. So grevilleas are really good. You can also, one of the things I was thinking about was when your herb garden starts to get overgrown and it goes all woody and starts to flower, that's actually a good thing because the bees are attracted to that. So before you kind of chop them down and take your cuttings off them, just to allow them to flower for a while so the bees can eat some of them. And also Greening Australia Nursery at the Gap has a guide for native species and their properties. So we had a look for our suburb, what the plants were that were endemic to our area, and then they tell you things about it. So we planted a potato vine, which is a native creeper that attracts bees to our gardens, also native to our particular suburb. But yeah, that's all I can think of right now.
That's fantastic, thank you.
I'll add to that quickly. It was it's really easy to, just like Michael Pollan in the film said, turn our lawns into really healthy, thriving bee gardens or just gardens. Lawns are really terrible things. They use up a lot of water, they use up a lot of energy, they just absorb the sun and continually ask for a very, very precious resource of ours. And your weekends as well. Throw some wildflower seeds on there. You can get some really, really, really great, good bug mixes from organic nurseries, like Nully Street Organic Nursery, and on the web on diggers.com.au. Find some great bug mix and throw that on the lawn and see what happens after 6 weeks. You'd be surprised at how beautiful some of the stuff growing up through that lawn is. And also wildflowers, wildflower pastures out in the country and out in the bush are sensational sources of year-round nectar sources for bees. They produce a lot of nectar. They also restore good positive nutrients within the soil, so they actually make your ground and your soil a lot healthier than it was with just your regular turf, your conventional turf. And then to add to that, things like rosemary and lavenders and salvias are great to plant. Zinnias, cornflowers, you can eat them and they're really easy to grow. They require a water a day, very light water, and are tasty in salads. So there's a whole list of beneficial bee plants up on the web, and they're just some off the top of our heads that are easily and readily available. But also be conscious that buying from Bunnings, guaranteed that 99% of them are systemic plants, and they have neonicotinoids, which is the name of the systemic pesticide that is being used on a lot of our crops. So just be conscious that these plants do contain some pretty nasty chemicals, and just be conscious of where you're buying from as well, most importantly. Grow from seed, definitely.
Thank you.
And untreated seed at that.
Would anybody like to ask some questions? Yep. Sorry, I'm just going to run up to you. Yeah? Hang on, I want to hear you.
That's that. Thank you all for all that you're doing to protect bees and provide sustainable food for us. I love the concept of bee guardians, which is, I don't know if it's big in the UK or in the US, but anyway, a few ways that we can be bee guardians that have already been touched on, but one that hasn't is about providing habitat for our native bees, and not just the colonial bees, but the solitary bees, and we can provide habitat for them in our own gardens. I wonder if any of you would have anything to share about that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, solitary bees are a really essential part of our pollinator cycle, and all are the 20,000 different types of bees that live in our ecosystem. Here in Australia, I think we have 22 different types of native bee. In total in Australia, we have something around 3,000 native bees, but 22 of those are colonising bees. The rest of them are solitary bees. Keep in mind that the European honeybee is an import. It came with us. Funnily enough, more than 3/4 of our plants are now European plants within our urban precincts. And added on a rural scale as well, a lot of those are imported plants as well. To help solitary and native bees, we can do really, really simple things that we can find from around the garden. We can get piles of sticks, piles of leaves. We can build bunches in corners. If you have a possum box, fill that full of broken twigs and pile them on top of each other, and create little crevices that bees can crawl inside of, crawl to the back of, store their egg, fill with pollen, seal it off. Getting little, piles of logs and piling them up. You're just creating very safe havens for bees to find and crawl into. You'd be surprised that within installing these tiny little native bee gardens, how quickly the bees come. They're searching for places, and to provide them is essential. So definitely thank you for raising that. And European bees by no means are the answer to all our problems. We need to support every kind of form of ecology, and bees are just the great. For me, I mean, that's how I connect with people. That's how I talk about our problems. So a great medium nonetheless.
Any others?
We've got a native bee, a couple of native bee hives, and the fella who does it, what's his name, Emma? Tim, is it? Is Tim here, is he? No, but it's just such a wonderful thing to see these little things. And he just split the hive the other day, and just the love that he puts into the whole thing, and explains it all. And the kids are up there and taste this, and just the experience of it. So we're basically, he's like similar to you, we're providing our backyard to host his native bees in, and all we get out of it is the enjoyment, and people coming along and saying, "Oh, you got native bees up the back there, having a bit of a yarn."
I just have a question for Jack. I just wanted to know if you provide a service of going to people's homes and, potentially looking at whether or not you could have your own hive or whatever.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it is fairly simple to install a beehive in your backyard. There's not much that you need, as opposed to, sometimes with the colonising native bees, you can't have too much sun. You've got to have specific amounts of shade. They only forage for small amounts, so enough in that area. European bees forage for up to 5 kilometres. So understanding what's in flower in your area is not essential, but good. Walk around your street, see what flowers at what times of year. If you want to get a beehive, the springtime is the best time to look into it. So over winter, coming into spring is definitely the most prosperous time for bees of all sorts, of all levels of ecology. Springtime is the blossoming time. At this current stage, I don't offer I'll drive out to your home, set a beehive up for you. This coming spring, I really look forward to putting together a whole bunch of kind of DIY kits, that gets people's hands involved, and build it yourself. The hives that I manage are fairly simple to put together. I've held workshops on building beehives for people, and people come along and nail and drill and air gun and all kinds of stuff, and leave with a complete beehive minus the bees. Come spring, they'll have those beehives of theirs filled. If you are after something that is, for me, my beehives, they typically produce a lot of honey. So you're constantly putting more and more space on the hives. If you're after something that's just providing pollination, and you can look into the more natural ways of beekeeping, and there's a workshop being held through inspiring events next Tuesday with Paul Wood, who's just up over your left shoulder, who does pollination-focused beehives, which replicate a tree log in the wild. Top bar beehives, they're called, as opposed to the Langstroths, which are kind of were created over 112, 115 years ago for pure inspection of the hives. So you saw how easily those beekeepers were ripping into those hives and pulling out bees. That's aggressive beekeeping. Mind you, I'm very, very calm with my bees, and I work like this on every occasion. I don't barely use smoke, although when I do, people think that I'm been smoking the hooch. So that's probably why I don't use it so much. But the bees, the bees are very friendly. You can operate on a day-to-day basis with them. They're great to have in your yard, and I would encourage you to explore the different avenues. There's 3 different types of beehives you can go down if you choose to, and Paul and I are 2 options. Yeah, and to have flowering crops in your yard is great, because you smell the nectar and the sweetness in the air, and all through West End there are some gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous trees that just emit some wonderful smells. And whenever they're in flower, I climb the trees, make sure I climb the trees and take a couple of photos of the bees up there, because I know it's a good chance they're mine. So it's a good thing to know your bees are helping.
So bees don't really want to sting us, Jack?
No, bees are really friendly. They do sting for sure. And if you're in their hive and you've got your face in their hive, then and your hands all through their business, then they're going to sting. Claudia in the front row here was up on a rooftop with me the other day and was very brave in getting up there, minus the suit. She was acting confident, and she got stung once, and we were up there for about an hour and 45, 2 hours. Out of 2 hives and approximately 60,000 bees, 1 sting is not such a bad effort on the finger as well, when your fingers are deep in the hive. So very friendly, very docile, and extraordinarily non-threatening. And she's alive, thankfully. No.
Any others? Oh, right up the back. Oh.
I was going to comment that there are beekeepers out because we have a lot of beekeepers who pollinate our farmers' farms. So we have a radius of about 2.5 hours average, but they are suffering, not so much CCD, but they have been suffering for quite a long time. If they put their bees in an organic apple patch for whatever, because they fly so far, you can't obviously stop them from going to the canola crop or the corn crop or whatever, all those sorts of things. So the problems that we experienced in that movie, not to the extent, actually Australia's been pretty minimal from the impact that we've seen in a lot of parts of the world. The latest that I heard anyway, but it might be worse now.
Can you mix European bees and native bees in your backyard? Can you have 2 different types of bees?
Well, there's a lot of discussion over this recently. If you have European bees next to native bees, what's going to happen? One's going to rob from the next. They're going to get into fights over whose nectar it is and whose property that tree was, and yada yada. I'll tell you now that I have witnessed them work harmoniously year-round for the past 12 months. I often have honeycomb being built in different parts of the hive, and I'll rip that honeycomb out and put it next to the hive because I don't want it there in that position in the hive. It's kind of wild honeycomb. It makes it difficult for me to inspect my hive. So occasionally I'll let the bees build it. When I pull it out, I'll place it next to the front of the hive, and the bees will climb in there and rob it back and restore it. I've, on many occasions, seen hundreds of native bees working in the same honeycomb cells as European bees, drawing out the same nectar with no threat, with no argument by each other's side. So I would say it might be a different story when you don't have such diversity in an area. For example, in the country, when you've got 5 to 10 major flowering crops in one season, you're going to have trouble with having 10 native hives and 10 or 15 European hives next to each other. There will be issues. or there might not be. But it all depends on the amount of diversity we provide for the bees. And having bees here in the city, as a lot of beekeepers in the city will testify and shout with me on this, is we're providing the bees with a constant supply of forage, with a constant supply of food. In the country, we give them 1 or 2 main flowering crops, and we move them on, and we truck them. Stability is a very, very, very important thing in the life of a bee colony, for it to be in one place. When a swarm of bees finds an environment or a place to live within a tree hollow, it doesn't just pick itself up and move it 45 kilometres away or 450 kilometres away. It stays there until it fills that hollow, and then it chooses to swarm when it's got enough protein in its pollen and enough carbohydrate in its nectar to supply a swarmed colony. So the colony will swarm and a new queen will emerge. And that's a weakened colony, but there's enough protein, there's enough carbohydrate for the colony to come back and remain very strong. I'm not sure how it works in a native hive, but I don't know the full complexities, but swarming still happens there. So swarming happens all the time, probably in the native hive in Rob's backyard. It's just less of a drama, I guess.
I think we have time for one last question, if there's anyone. Yep. And then we'll draw some prizes.
I'll add a little something too while we're waiting. If you're looking for a source of organic seeds for your seed crops, Green Harvest at Mullaney, and they have a good insect mix, which is part of the raffle prize. But the other one is Eden Seeds at Beachmont. They're both good organic seed sources.
Thank you very much for the movie and the sharing all the work that you're doing. And something that kind of came out for me when Jack was speaking. George Orwell talked about doublespeak and how the government controls the way that people think by defining the words that they use, and we see euphemisms like murder becomes civilian casualties becomes collateral damage. And when you're describing how the bees died near the racetrack in Hendra, just occurred to me for the first time that pesticides sounds like a marketing term from a chemical company, because if language is to be accurate, either the bees are pests or the chemicals that are killing them are not pesticides, but they're better to be called something more accurate since they also kill bees. Is there any sort of movement in terms of radicalizing language to sort of, make that more clear? You're talking about communicating with people. It's like a double speak if you say it's a pesticide that kills bees.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think one of the biggest problems we have in Australia at the moment is that we look at the rest of the world and we chant them on, except we don't take a lot of action here on our own shores. And that's, I know specifically from my generation, we do like to dig our heels a little bit deep, but then we kind of just sit back and observe, and we don't often speak outside of our realms of circles, outside of our own little cliques. I very much see where you're coming from with the radicalization of terming these, terming what's happening out there. Maybe it is something we need to do. Maybe it's something that we need to start rebranding, so to speak, because when I got the names back from the DPI and the test results, it took 6 months. It wasn't something that happens overnight. It's something that is very lowly funded. To get it tested by the DPI for pesticides, I didn't tell them, can you please test for pesticides? I said, could you please test for American foul brood, European foul brood, chalk brood, blah, blah, blah. For 3 others, nosema, and then, which is one of the diseases they spoke of here, nosema. And then, would you mind checking for pesticides? All of the results before pesticides came back negative, and pesticides came back result of pesticides. And these were from bees that had been sitting there for 6 days, very low amounts of pesticides, but it was still killing the bees. So what do we call them? I'm not entirely sure. I'm not a linguist. But maybe it is time for us to come together and actually talk about, how do we draw attention to these major issues? How do we draw attention to not only the pesticides that are being used on farms, but the pesticides and the herbicides and the systemic things that are being sold on the shelves in Coles and Woolworths and Bunnings and Mitre 10 and used by councils, exactly. We've got Brisbane City Council here. I dealt with Roma Street the other day, and they're doing great things, no doubt. But I heard for a long time they were using organic methods and organic principles in their garden as of about 18 months ago. Bullshit. I walked straight up to the horticulturist and I said, can we put bees up there? They want to get a couple of beehives within the gardens for I guess, tours and stuff. And the horticulturist, first thing he said was, oh, we spray there. We spray everywhere. I said, is there anywhere that we can put them that's going to be out of the way of spraying? He says, yeah, up on that hill where it's got no plants. But there's still a good chance that the spray is going to hit the front of the beehives. And they can't stop that. They can't stop spraying because they've gotten themselves into a pattern of doing so. So drawing ourselves away from this dependence and this reliance on chemicals is going to be a very long road, but it's going to be a very educational road, let me tell you, because we're all going to feel the benefits of it in the end, if we choose to.
That's a good point, because our language has been co-opted. Like the word sustainability is now used by all the major corporations who are doing the exact opposite. So there's one case for arguing for or demanding the truth in the original meaning of the word. The one that I always talk about is the word competition. The true meaning of the word competition is to strive to help everyone get better. Yet it's been turned into something that's all about dog eat dog and climb to the top. But so there's that side of things, because we've seen big environmental organisations being co-opted and slowed down to incrementalism by the corporations in how they approach things. So we're seeing not much really done there over the last 20 years. And now we're facing this final run where humanity is slowly becoming aware, and the bee is the canary in the coal mine. So there's being really honest about what a word means and sticking to that and being really truthful to that, and writing clearly in whatever you're involved in, what you're about and who you are and how you're going to hold true to that. Then the other side of it is when I think about the word pesticide, for instance, there's not many words that have the ending side, so that there's not many words that end in side, and the only one that isn't termed in that way, like suicide, pesticide, herbicide, fungicide, those sorts of things, there is suicide. So it actually is saying we are committing suicide by using these things. So you can see it the other way and say, well, actually, it is very truthful in calling it a pesticide. It's killing pests and it's causing the suicide of environmental and us as humans.
Just very quickly, I think it's a good point too about demonising certain bugs and certain plants in your garden too, about the language that we use about weeds, for example, which is obviously slightly subjective. What is a weed and what isn't a weed? And at the end of the day, it's about an ecosystem. And if there's a balance of good things and bad things and harmless things and they're all working together, it doesn't matter if you have clover and billy goat weed in your lawn. Don't worry about it, because the bees will use that. And, if you see a horrible looking bug, well, just be careful. It might be an assassin bug that's eating the bad bug. Like, you don't know. So I think, it's a good point to,
Thank you. Thank you very, very much, guys, for being here tonight and for all the amazing work that you're doing. Thank you. And thank you to all of you as well for being here, for listening and for being part of this movement.